All right. I have a chance to do a whole bunch of rough starts on videos that I'm planning. So let's start off with War and Peace. War and Peace, which, they talk about big Mount Rushmores or other monuments that you might scale, and War and Peace is definitely one of them. And I happen to get the book for cheap, so that's the reason why I picked the translation, Perez, Pivir and Volonsky translation. So, I've heard good things about it. I've heard bad things about it. It was fairly good translation. I have issues, like everyone does, with gigantic untranslated bits of French in it, but that seems to be. I can see what Tolstoy was getting at with putting a shit ton of French into a novel where it's a Russian society that is highly permeated with French. Everyone, all the aristocracy speak French, but now they're being invaded by France, Napoleonic France. So there's that. So I can see why that is there. Yeah. Reading it on the ebook, it's kind of annoying. You just keep on clicking. I mean, I live in Canada. Theoretically, we're all bilingual up here and all can speak fluent French and English. That's not the case. Maybe that's the case over in Eastern Canada, where there's actually a big hunk of the Quebecois, French Canadian population as you go further that way. But here in monolingual BC, not so much. Well, it's not monolingual. It's just the linguas are probably have more other languages than in English. See, this is the kind of stuff, the gold, that will not make it into a actual quick review reaction to War and Peace. I was surprised that this book was a history book, equally a history philosophy book as it was a fiction book. It's I can see why Tolstoy doesn't want to call this a novel, because it has big hunks that are not novels. There are it's a historical novel in places with fictional characters, but it's also a historical novel with Napoleon, Alexander the First, some of the generals, and then it becomes kind of almost like a history textbook. And then it becomes a book that's Tolstoy is arguing with historians. I was surprised. I was expecting this to be kind of a great man book. You'd have the great man of Napoleon and the great man of Alexander. And indeed, in the beginning chapters, the characters in the book definitely hero worship Napoleon. Even the Russians can hero worship Napoleon and Alexander the First and some of the generals the Russian generals to an extent, but they definitely get disillusioned on this, and Tolstoy does a really good job of portraying war as it's chaos. It is just complete chaos. If you think it's hard to organize 3 people to do something for like a night out, think about doing that but with 10,000 people, and it's not like a night out, but it's trying to murder the people on the other side. Nothing goes wrong. Nothing goes right. And indeed, I think about Kutsov, the main Russian general that Tolstoy, the field marshal, is somebody who is respected because he seems to recognize. Yeah, I'm not here. I can't finally control. This isn't finally controlling. I can push things certain ways. But there's also just sort of a general will that is expressed by all the various people. We're going from all the way from soldiers down, of like they want to do something, and sometimes I can hold them back from doing that, but other times I cannot. Napoleon's genius is definitely put into question. Tolstoy definitely has this point of view of like that really, I mean, it might be hyperbole, maybe it's not, that Napoleon had as little influence on whether they were going to march on Russia as individual soldiers had. Of like, it's all individual people deciding what to do, or deciding to obey what they've been told what to do. And sometimes, most definitely, a lot of times they do not obey. When they say charge, go forward, there's definitely people who say, screw that, I'm running the other way, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so it gets into that real, I think it's called fog of war idea very, very well. But it's also kind of a thing of just causation in general. Of Tolstoy describes this as movements of people east, and then movements of people west, and it's very much kind of a God's point of view of looking down on all the little ants and what all the little ants are doing. And wouldn't it be ridiculous to say, oh, you see that little ant there with the hat? That's Napoleon, and it's telling all these other ants what to do. You would not believe, you would not think that. And yeah, very, very much. So there is that. We do get, I mean, he's extremely excellent at characters. I think at the beginning there were so many characters, and so all the various Russian names, that it was hard to hold together. And I kind of missed, I've read Anna Karenina before, and that had Anna Karenina and the other guy who was kind of a Tolstoy self-insert character. It felt like, to me, very much interested in how to run a farm. And actually, I think that guy was far more, I should find out what his name is. I find that was the far more sympathetic character in the book. I actually don't, that should be something I can talk about, is I just don't think Tolstoy's views on women, or how he portrays women, I think he gives men a lot more credit than he does women in his books. There's a slightly kind of a childlike aspect he seems to give a lot of his main heroines, at least. And like Natasha in this book is someone who, well, I can see her motivations and how that they came to them. It's definitely done in a way that I'm slightly dissatisfied. I'm far more invested in characters like Pierre, who is kind of a big bumbling guy who ends up at the beginning of the novel inheriting a shit ton of money and making a terrible choice in a marriage, basically because he's horny. And Prince Andrei, who is somebody who gets broken by his experiences in war, sort of break him, but also kind of comes to a realization at the end. Tolstoy is extremely good at writing about people dying, and I mean the process of a long, lingering, not like he talked, people die in the battles in these books, and there's appropriately kind of gruesome and horrific non-romanticism to the battles in here. This isn't gallant young, well, it is gallant young soldiers rushing into battle, but it's like, and then it's brutalized, traumatized young guys and others after that. Tolstoy is really good at getting like kind of all the aspects, like from the gallant soldiers, but also just the civilians and the chaos and threat of rape and of starvation and just kind of mean stupidity of like how people get treated under these circumstances. So yeah. When I read this book, I got to the epilogue, and I said, oh, I'm going to read the epilogue, but that's going to take me, another week or so. So I'll just record my impressions there. And I'm glad I did, because the epilogues it was interesting. The first part of the epilogue, there's a big time jump, which was actually kind of interesting, because it gave you, it did not want to give you kind of and then they lived happily ever after thing. It's like, no, their lives went on. Things were still continued to be complicated. Happy couples maybe weren't as happy, but, they were kind of dysfunctionally functional, kind of that sort of thing. And then for the final bit of this book, which has had lots of hunks where it's like it's very much him arguing with historians about how, you know, historians have put meaning into a lot of the random actions in this book, that the retreat from the French by the Russians was not something that was consciously done, that a lot of Napoleon's, you know, master moves were not master moves. Like, you know, these are all kind of improvisations on the day, or you know, things that were not planned out by individual geniuses, heroes on either side, but simply kind of organic things that happened with these two armies, with kind of the course of events, and all that. So we get that, but then in the final part of this book is this final epilogue is just this long philosophical discourse on causation and meaning. Like, really, it's like, this is a philosophy. Suddenly it's a philosophy book. And I'm enough of a history geek that the history parts were like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. And it's like, this is a historical novel, so kind of getting into kind of arguing with historians over this stuff, that kind of makes sense. But at least on this reading of it, this last section really lost me. I think I tried earlier in life to read philosophy, but I found it just so alienating. Perhaps it's just like my bias for wanting a narrative. It's like, if I'm going to get nonfiction, I'm going to get history nonfiction. Okay, I'm going to stop there. But yeah, so kind of a downer point to leave A War and Peace, but overall, wow, you know, it's a War and Peace.